Hi, this is Adriana in Long Beach, and this is a shout out to Black people. I want to give you some information that you may not have heard yet or read yet, directly related to why Black people are dying at higher rates of COVID-19. I am not a scientist. I am not a doctor. This is science-based material that I'm giving you. It has to do with glutathione and vitamin D and how those relate to morbidity for COVID-19. So let's start out with a paper produced in the Journal of the American Chemists Society. It's about the relationship between glutathione deficiency and COVID-19 death. It's by Alexei Polonnikov. It was produced just recently, like within the last month. I don't see the date on here, but oh yeah, June 2020. So I'm not going to read the whole article, but I have highlighted a couple of points. The first is the crucial role of glutathione in determining individual responsiveness to COVID-19 infection and disease pathogenesis. That's the first highlight. So why is glutathione playing a central role? It's playing a central role, first of all, because it is an antioxidant. And one of its antioxidant properties is to keep you from getting oxidative stress. It's also known that virus-induced modulation of the host antioxidant response represents a crucial determinant for the progression of several viral diseases. What is virus-induced modulation of the host antioxidant response? Go to YouTube and look up cytokine storm. The video I recommend is 23 minutes long, but it relates directly to the cytokine storm and to COVID-19 death. What it comes down to is this. You have an immune system, and the antibodies in that immune system and the other immune fighting proteins and molecules that your body produces are supposed to fight the disease. Sometimes, especially when it's a new disease that the body's not familiar with, comes on, the body goes overboard. And instead of fighting just the disease, the proteins and molecules that your body produces start fighting your organs, start fighting your actual body. And that is called a cytokine storm. Glutathione helps modulate your immune response so that you don't get a cytokine storm where your body starts attacking its own organs. So that's one thing that glutathione does. The second thing that glutathione does this is really important. You know how it's being said, people who are dying of COVID-19 have much higher rates already of certain diseases. Well, or they have comorbidities. This chart points out a couple of things that are related to glutathione deficiency that are also related to higher rate of COVID-19 death. Being male. Males typically are more likely to have glutathione deficiency than females, and males are dying at a higher rate of COVID. The lung diseases that people get and the respiratory issues that people have related to cigarettes are more profound in people that have glutathione deficiency. There's a host of chronic diseases that are related to glutathione deficiency. Remember, it's an antioxidant, and as you age, you have less glutathione deficiency, so people 65 and older are also dying at higher rates of COVID. And the last thing, and by far the most important thing to Black people that I want to highlight, is the relationship that glutathione has with processing vitamin D. It has also been found that lower levels of L-cysteine, a rate-limiting precursor of glutathione, and glutathione correlated with lower vitamin D binding protein and VD levels in TD2 patients. The TD2 patients were the ones that died of COVID. So glutathione is essential to processing vitamin D, and that relates directly to high melanin people. Does it relate to? I am going to play you 2 snippets from the podcast Radio Lab that are going to point out exactly what I'm talking about. When we come back, I'll explain to you about glutathione and why black people and high melanin people have less of it. But first, I want you to listen to these snippets of the podcast. I actually want you to listen to the whole podcast, and I'll link to it in the video description. I'll also link to this study. But right now, don't skip over. Listen to these snippets.
It's like the closest connection we have to plants. It's our own little form of photosynthesis that's happening every minute we're out in the sun.
Yeah.
And crazier still, turns out this little photosynthesized vitamin is correlating with COVID in a series of strange ways.
Hi, this is Frank.
Hey, Frank, Simon here from Radiolab.
How's it going?
One of which was noticed by this guy, Dr. Frank Lau,
Associate Professor of Plastic Surgery at LSU Health Sciences Center in New Orleans.
as he was looking at COVID patients in the ICU.
The core question is, okay, what seems to be driving the more severe cases? And so some things popped out like, nutrition, obesity, diabetes rates, and so forth. But the one factor that really stood out as being explanatory is vitamin D insufficiency.
Folks with mild symptoms had plenty of it, while folks in the hospital didn't have much.
The ones who were really, really sick, some of them had undetectable levels of vitamin D.
And, well, his paper is pre-published. It hasn't been peer-reviewed yet because the science is moving very fast. This has been seen in other hospitals throughout the United States as well. So that's the sort of local correlation. And then if we zoom out globally, a team from Northwestern recently compared the severity of cases, the mortality rate between different countries. And what they found was that the best predictor of how poorly a country would fare, how high their mortality rate would be, was its rate of vitamin D deficiency. Basically, the more vitamin D deficient a country was, the more bad outcomes they were expected to have. Vitamin D supplements, which is controversial in part because those recommendations are often involving race.
The NHS is to launch an investigation into why people from ethnic minority backgrounds are more likely to be affected by COVID-19.
So leaving the States here for a minute, in the UK, much like in the US, there are racial disparities in the number of COVID deaths, specifically when it comes to doctors and medical workers.
The first 10 doctors to die from the disease were from ethnic minorities.
65% of all NHS workers who have died from COVID-19 are from a black, Asian or minority ethnic background.
Yes, we started noticing this disparity way back in April.
This is Dr. Parag Singhal. He is a British endocrinologist and also the National Secretary of the British Association of Physicians of Indian Origin.
Our main aim is to offer Indian origin doctors protection from racism, discrimination which happens.
They've got about 8,000 members, and he says back in April he started hearing from them.
Because at that time there were, I think, 13 or 14 deaths of healthcare workers. And all of them were from what you call BAME, which is Black, Asian, Minority Ethnic Population.
BAME, or Doctors of Color, I think as we would call them in the United States?
Yes, that's right. And that got us worried. So a lot of theories were proposed, more prevalence of diabetes in BAME population, socio-economic deprivation.
And then also this vitamin D idea.
We know for a fact that if we are black, it's very difficult to absorb sunlight and make vitamin D. That's bottom line. And the prevalence of vitamin D deficiency in black population is enormous.
And so knowledge of that fact, plus then these early correlational studies that were coming out,
that started us to understand that maybe vitamin D has something to do with it.
So folks with just so I can pull that apart for a second, folks with darker skin have less vitamin D?
Folks with darker skin have a harder time synthesizing vitamin D, and folks with darker skin are far more likely to be vitamin D deficient. So in the US here, 82% of African Americans are vitamin D deficient, which is about double that of the general population.
Okay, so if you weren't taking me seriously, but in the earlier part of the video, after listening to the snippets, I bet you're paying attention now, huh? vitamin D deficiency is why Black people are dying at much higher rates of COVID-19. And they are unable to process they have vitamin D deficiency because they have a lower rate of being able to process vitamin D, and they have a lower rate of being able to process vitamin D because they are lacking in glutathione. Why are high melanin people more lacking in glutathione? Because of evolution, basically. Check this out. The other beautiful thing that glutathione does is it protects the body from the harmful effects of UV rays. So how do you make, they say you make vitamin D by being out in the sun. This is what happens. You go out in the sun hits you, your body's like, I'm being attacked by UV rays. What can I do? What can I do? And your body calls on glutathione to help protect it from UV rays, right? And this is the glutathione that you've gotten from your completely nutritious diet, that there's plenty of foods that have glutathione in them, right? And you're eating nutritiously all the time, right? Well, if you have a black body, you have melanin. And melanin makes it so that you don't absorb as much sunlight. So if you don't absorb as much sunlight, your body says, yes, there's glutathione in this food and glutathione in that food, but I don't need that much of it because I already have melanin, which is keeping me from absorbing so much sunlight, which is keeping me a little bit more protected from those UV rays. So it's an evolutionary thing that black people don't have as much glutathione because they already have a protective layer against UV rays, so the body doesn't need it as much. Except that was back in the day, before we had all kinds of chemicals going into our body, before we had all kinds of toxins. Now we need glutathione because it's an antioxidant and we're being shot with pollution and toxins all over the place, right? But evolutionarily, back when the world was a little bit more pristine, the toxin was the sun with the UV rays, right? And we didn't need it as much then. And as you can see, if you want to know the association between glutathione and melanin, look up glutathione in Google Images and see how much of it is about glutathione as a skin whitener. Glutathione actually demelanates the skin, and that's why it's advertised. Glutathione pills, glutathione shots are advertised as skin lighteners in those cultures where, unfortunately, people want to be lighter for cultural reasons, whatever. So get your vitamin D supplements on, right? But the thing is, you need to be able to process the vitamin D instead of just taking the supplement and peeing it out. So that means you have to get your glutathione supplements out as well. And I do have a recommendation for a glutathione supplement. You can see it in the video description, but speak to your own nutritionist about what glutathione supplement is best for you. Please pass this on. This is scientifically based information. Please don't take my word for it. Please listen to the entire Radiolab podcast. Please read the entire study. You don't have to be a scientist to understand it. You'll get the gist. Just read it. It's like 3 pages long. It's not 20 pages long. Read it so that you can say you looked at their stuff for yourself. All right. Please, vitamin D supplements, glutathione supplements. Let's fight this together.